And we are going straight to Mumbai, where senior advocate Mahesh Jethmalani is joining us. Mr. Jethmalani, really appreciate your time. I'm looking at the judgment or the verdict of the Supreme Court, Mr. Jethmalani, and it says, and I'm quoting the judgment, it says that the reliance on the OCCRP report is rejected and the reliance on a third-party organization report without any verification cannot be used as proof. These are very, very strong words, sir. But we have seen a pattern over the years. What kind of vested interests are working with a view to have targeted attacks?
Well, I mean, clearly this was a misconceived petition, and the Supreme Court's observations make that very explicit, unambiguously clear. I mean, the kind of material they gave to the Supreme Court and wasted the Supreme Court's time to have an SIT investigation, and then, you know, all the allegations against SEBI's lackadaisical approach in the whole matter have been rubbished by the Supreme Court. I mean, they found that SEBI has acted as expeditiously as it could, with a possible delay of only 10 days in the matter. So, but there's a cabal in the Supreme Court, that revels in this kind of thing. And I'm sorry to say that they are politically motivated, and some of the issues that they take up in the Supreme Court, are not in national interest. That's the best that can be said about them. But you read between the lines, but they are not in national interest, right? It's happened with Rafale before, and it was rubbished. They went twice. There's a review sought which has been dismissed. So this keeps happening, and it's the same bunch of people. You know, they want to try and rule the country by the bunch of vociferous lawyers who want to try and get into policy making and often acting at the interest of foreign powers inimical to India's interests. So this is now becoming a practice, and the kind of material they bring, it's it's worth quoting what Justice Chandrachud in his judgment for the court has said in the end. Petitions that lack adequate research and rely on unverified and unrelated material tend to, in fact, be counterproductive. This word of caution must be kept in mind by lawyers and members of civil society alike. Please see what the result was. You go into court with a completely politically motivated case based on flimsy evidence, newspaper reports, all hearsay. This is not admissible. In fact, the OCCRP report, some of the material was given by Prashant Bhushan himself, one of the lawyers appearing for one of the petitioners. Right now, when the court observed, right, that this can be counterproductive, see what has happened. This was not part of the prayer, right? But in sometime early November, I had actually made a tweet. I had actually posted a tweet where I had said that there's something very disturbing about this whole, the complaint which has been made by Jay Dehadre, in which he has said a lot of the Hindenburg material report, right, was based on Mahua Moitra's tweets, right? And I had said that this calls for an inquiry from the Supreme Court, right, as to whether political vested interests in India and other corporate interests, right, were acting in concert with Hindenburg to hammer Adani shares. Now, just see, this was not part of the scope of the Supreme Court order, but in their conclusion in point I, this is what the Supreme Court says. SEBI and the investigating agencies of the union government shall probe into whether the loss suffered by Indian investors due to the conduct of Hindenburg Research and any other entities in taking short positions involved any infraction of the law, and if so, suitable action shall be taken.
Okay. Mr. Jethmalani, so are you
keeping the interests?
Yes. Are you then of the opinion that because the Supreme Court has said that SEBI must investigate, there is need to go into the details as to who was responsible for this kind of loss to the investors, which amounts to almost 4,000 crores? Or perhaps more. In fact, it's much more.
Yes. This is now in the interest of the retail investors, not of the Adani group, right? Because obviously retail investors lost a lot of money because of the crash, right? And this was admittedly a preordained, preconceived well thought out strategy by Hindenburg, who claimed to be professional short sellers, right? Their business is making money out of short selling. Now, the Supreme Court has said steps must be taken to inform retailers to avoid short selling. But in this particular case, they have said that they must see if Hindenburg and any other entities in taking short positions involved any fraction of the law. Right? So this is an area, the original petitioners did not come to this because, obviously they wouldn't. Right? They were relying on the Hindenburg report amongst other flimsy reports. Right? Now, Hindenburg had a motivated interest. And the Supreme Court now has said that you examine this aspect as well.
Okay. So are you of the opinion then that, since you have talked about a cabal which is functioning here, there are certain quarters regarding the role who have been questioning the role of regulators. Do you think this judgment will be able to have a closure on this issue? Because certainly this is almost like a dangerous game of settling political scores by dragging corporate houses into it.
Well, I mean, this judgment should be a deterrent, right? But the Supreme Court, with all respect to it, has made similar observations about, public interest litigations not being either publicity interest litigations or political interest litigations. They've said this in the past, but people have been undeterred, and this keeps happening, right? In my respectful view, the petitioners have been very lucky that some exemplary costs have not been imposed on them.
What kind of mechanism then, Mr. Jethmalani, should be in place to ensure that such frivolous complaints are disposed of at the regulatory stage itself?
Well, I mean, that's what the Supreme Court really has said today. They actually said that when you have statutory bodies vested with jurisdiction to, investigate, and they have the expertise as well to investigate matters of public interest for the protection, in this case, of investors, we should leave it to them. But there's a very limited area of judicial review. So, this is now, it has been enunciated in the past, but it has been repeated this time. I hope that the highest court, before entertaining such petitions in future, right? Because it's a colossal waste of time. You had an expert committee, etc., etc. Everybody has been galvanized into sort of, meeting timelines put by the court into this case. So I hope that in future, the limited scope, so far at least as public regulatory bodies are concerned, judicial review of their actions, I hope in the future at least that this happens, that these salutary words are observed by the court.
Okay. Mr. Jethmalani, in fact, to put that exact number, the Indian investors lost 4 lakh crore. That's a huge number. Do you think this will set the right precedent in the interest of Indian investors, and they would be protected and cushioned against such targeted short sellers?
Yeah, the next step is what the Supreme Court, there is one final step, right, which the Supreme Court has, as I said, mandated, that there shall be an investigation, right, by SEBI and the investigating agencies of the union government, which I suppose means CBI, etc. And if there's money, if there's any money laundering involved, then the ED as well will get into the act. That there shall be a probe into whether the loss suffered by Indian investors due to the conduct of Hindenburg and other entities was an infraction of the law. So that's the step that requires to be taken to make sure that otherwise there are circuit breakers. SEBI has put many steps into place to ensure that investors don't suffer. But sometimes it will still happen, right? As in this case, for instance. Now, in this case, there was, as you said, 4 lakh crores was the lost cause. So, an investigation by the CBI, right? This is a pure money-making operation. The upside of Hindenburg's so-called great research, the downside of Hindenburg's great research, and their money-making ability through these short-selling activities is a lost cause to investors, right? So, a probe by SEBI and the CBI investigation, whether in fact they were motivated by a cabal in India particularly, right, is necessary to create the deterrence you talk about for the future.
Talking about, the global investors, and that brings me to my last question, Mr. Jethmalani. How will global investors react to such mature handling of the issue, one would say? Will they be more upbeat about India and its regulatory mechanism henceforth?
Look, Adani is only a small part of the very resilient Indian stock markets. We have a great growth story. If the intention was to, upset that apple cart, right, of those behind it, they have failed miserably. And as I said, the India story is just too good at the moment, right? And I'm sure it's going to continue for years to come for anybody to create some great macro turbulence in our stock markets, our exchanges, and our economy. But there has been an attempt, at least in this Hindenburg case, and it seems to have failed. But there has been, as you pointed out, that 4 lakh crore loss to retail investors.
Yes. Mr. Jethmalani, always a pleasure to listen to you on your views on these important judgments. Thank you so much for your time.